A millionaire decides to adopt a sister for his daughter and goes to an orphanage full of hope. But when he enters the room, he comes across a scene that leaves him in shock. The chosen girl is holding photos of his late wife. Before he can react, the girl screams and points to the photo with a sparkle in her eyes. "Daddy, this is Mommy," she says, making the millionaire's world crumble in an inexplicable mystery. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, tell us which city you're watching us from, and we'll keep going. Thomas Müller adjusted his Italian silk tie in front of the mirror in his penthouse. His brown eyes, though still piercing, held a melancholy that 3 years had not been able to erase. The reflection showed a man of 42, with grey hair at the temples, an elegant demeanor but with an emptiness that no amount of business success could fill. Little Sophia, his 7-year-old daughter, was playing in the living room with her favorite doll, the one Isabel had given her for her last birthday. The little girl was the only reason Thomas still had a smile, even if it was sometimes forced. It was amazing how she had inherited her mother's striking features, the same wavy brown hair, the delicate nose, and especially that sweet look that seemed to see through people's souls. "Daddy, are you nervous?" Sophia asked, dropping her doll and running to him. Thomas bent down to his daughter's level, adjusting the pink bow in her hair. "A little, princess. It's an important decision for our family," he replied, trying to convey reassurance. But how could he explain to a child that he was about to completely change the dynamics of their lives? The idea of adoption didn't come out of nowhere. It took months of therapy, conversations with close friends, and most importantly, endless nights watching Sophia play alone in the huge apartment. Her daughter's loneliness was a magnified reflection of her own, and something had to change. Lena, the housekeeper who had worked with the family for over a decade, came into the room carrying a folder of documents. "Mr. Thomas, all the papers the social worker requested are here. I didn't forget anything." Thomas picked up the folder, double-checking each document. His life was about precision, about meticulous control over every detail. As CEO of one of the largest technology companies in the country, he knew that mistakes were not an option. But something about this morning made him uneasy, as if the universe were about to play a trick on him. L'Arport du Sol was known as one of the most respected orphanages in the city. Located in an old mansion, the institution had an impeccable reputation and a considerable waiting list of families interested in adoption. Thomas was only able to schedule a visit thanks to the influence of his friend, who was a judge. During the entire car ride, Sophia couldn't stop talking about what it would be like to have a sister. She had already decided which toys they would share, which games they would teach first, and how they would decorate the guest room together that would be transformed. The driver pulled up in front of the orphanage's imposing gate. The 1940s building maintained its original elegance, with well-kept gardens and a welcoming atmosphere that contrasted with the preconceived notion many have of such institutions. Sister Abigail, the headmistress, greeted them at the entrance. She was a woman in her 60s, with a kind smile and shrewd eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. "Welcome to Sunset Home," she said, leading them down the main hallway. Thomas observed everything with professional attention: the impeccable facilities, the well-cared-for children playing in the courtyard, the attentive staff. Everything seemed perfectly normal, except for a strange feeling that began to grow in his chest as they advanced through the house. It was when they reached the main hall that everything changed. The large room, with its large windows that let in the natural morning light, was occupied by a few children reading or drawing at small tables. But it was a lone figure in the corner of the room that immediately caught Thomas's attention. A girl of about 6 years old sat alone in an old armchair with a book on her lap. Unlike the other children, she did not move when the group entered. Her eyes, an unusual shade of amber, fixed on Thomas with disconcerting intensity. Before any formal introduction could be made, the girl slowly closed her book, stood up, and walked toward them. Her steps were soft, almost ethereal, as if she were floating above the wooden floor. When she stopped in front of Thomas, her gaze conveyed an ancient wisdom completely unbecoming of her age. "I knew you would come, Daddy," she said in a calm, almost musical tone. The world seemed to freeze in that instant. Thomas felt a shiver run down his spine and his legs felt weak. How could that child say something like that? How could she look at him like that, as if she had known him for years? Sister Abigail looked equally surprised, her eyebrows rising above the frames of her glasses. "Clara, dear, we mustn't—" But before he could finish his sentence, Sophia, who had been exploring the hall, came running back with something in her hands. Her eyes were shining with excitement and confusion. "Daddy, look, that's Mommy!" Thomas turned to his daughter, his heart racing even faster. In Sophia's small hands were some old photographs, yellowed with age. Photographs he recognized instantly. They were of Isabel, his late wife. The air seemed to grow thicker, almost unbreathable. How could those photos be there? Why had that mysterious girl called him father? And why, despite the absurdity of the situation, did something inside him resonate with an inexplicable truth? Clara continued to stare at him, her amber eyes reflecting not surprise or curiosity, but deep recognition. As if this moment was not a meeting, but a long-awaited reunion. Thomas looked at Sister Abigail, searching for some rational explanation for what was happening. The orphanage director seemed to be fighting an internal battle, as if she were holding a secret too heavy to carry alone. The successful businessman, the man who always had the answers for everything, now found himself faced with a mystery that defied all his logic and reason. And that Saturday morning, which was supposed to be just another calculated step in his meticulously planned life, was about to become the beginning of a journey that would forever change his understanding of love, destiny, and the invisible, bonds that connect souls through time. Sister Abigail's office was a welcoming space, with antique wooden shelves filled with books and a discreet crucifix on the wall. Thomas sat in one of the upholstered chairs, while Sophia and Clara were led by one of the assistants to see the garden. Her hands shook slightly as she held the photographs of Isabel. "Mr. Muller," Sister Abigail began, her voice thick with hesitation. "There is something I need to show you, something I have kept for years, waiting for the right moment." She stood slowly and walked to an old cabinet in the corner of the room. Using a small key that she wore on a string around her neck, she opened a drawer and took out a carved wooden box. The object itself seemed to tell a story. It was a medium-sized box, with delicate hand-carved details and a small gold clasp. Thomas noticed that there was an initial engraved on the lid, I. "This box arrived at the orphanage exactly 6 years ago," the nun explained, placing it carefully on the table. Along with it came specific instructions about when and to whom it should be delivered. Thomas watched Sister Abigail's every move with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. When she opened the box, the soft scent of old paper filled the room. Inside, arranged chronologically, were dozens of letters, all handwritten. "They are all addressed to Clara," the sister said, carefully picking up one of the letters, "and they were written by someone who called herself Isabel Muller." The businessman felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. His hands shook even more as he picked up one of the letters. The handwriting was unmistakable. That delicate slanted script he knew so well, that he had seen in so many love notes left on the breakfast table over the years of their marriage. "That's impossible," Thomas muttered, more to himself than to his sister. "Isabel, she left 3 years ago. Some of these letters are dated weeks before." His voice faltered. He couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, he began to read the letter in his hand. "My dear Clara, by the time you read this letter, you will probably have met Thomas. I know it sounds confusing now, but trust your heart. It always knew the way home. You are more special than you know, my little one. Even before you were born, I knew our paths would cross. Cherish the memories I planted in your heart. One day, everything will make sense. With eternal love, Isabel." Thomas ran his fingers over the words, as if he could feel Isabel's presence through them. How is that possible? Clara wasn't even born when Isabel... Sister Abigail adjusted her glasses, choosing her words carefully. Clara arrived at the orphanage 5 years ago when she was just a baby. Along with her came this box and a sealed envelope with precise instructions. We were to gradually deliver the letters to Clara as she grew older, and to keep the box until a man named Thomas Müller came to the orphanage. And did you follow those instructions? Clara read all those letters? Yes, as she learned to read. She is an extraordinarily intelligent child, Mr. Müller. And there is something else. The sister hesitated again, as if weighing the impact of her next words. Clara always spoke of you and Sophia, from a very young age, even before we began. Delivering the letters, she drew pictures of a family, a father, 2 girls, and a maternal figure who she said was elsewhere but always present. Thomas picked more letters from the box, reading random passages. In each one, Isabel spoke to Clara as if she knew her intimately, describing details of the girl's personality that would prove true years later, telling stories about her family and sharing memories that only someone very close to her could know. There's something else you need to see, the sister said, pulling a yellowed envelope from the bottom of the box. This was marked to be opened only when you came. With trembling hands, Thomas opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Isabel's handwriting even more emotional than usual. My beloved Thomas, if you are reading this, it means that you have finally found Clara. I know that your rational mind is searching for explanations, trying to find logic where only the heart can understand. There are mysteries in the universe that go beyond our earthly understanding, my love. Clara is not just any child. She is a gift, a bridge between worlds, proof that love transcends all barriers. Take care of her as I know you will. She is already your daughter, just as she has always been mine. Don't be afraid of the inexplicable. Sometimes the greatest miracles come disguised as coincidences. Forever yours, Isabel. Bus, take the DNA test. I know you'll need something concrete to believe in, but remember, the truth you seek may be greater than science can explain. Thomas dropped the letter on the table, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How could Isabel have foreseen all of this? How could she have written letters to a child who did not yet exist, accurately describing his personality and characteristics? Through the office window, he could see Clara and Sophia playing in the garden. The 2 girls seemed to have connected instantly, as if they had known each other for years. Clara picked a flower and placed it in Sophia's hair, just like Isabel used to do. The businessman felt his heart tighten. That gesture, so familiar, so intimate, was another piece of the puzzle that was forming before him. A puzzle that defied all logic, but that, in some inexplicable way, made his heart recognize a truth that his mind still resisted accepting. Sister Abigail watched silently, respecting Thomas's processing time. She had kept this secret for years, waiting for the predestined moment when all the pieces would fall into place. What should I do? Thomas asked, more to himself than to the nun. Perhaps, she replied softly, the question is not what to do, but what your heart already knows. The genetic analysis lab occupied the entire 10th floor of a modern building. Thomas had chosen the most prestigious location in the city, the one that catered to celebrities and business people who required absolute discretion. After a week of bureaucracy and meetings with the orphanage staff, he was given permission to perform the DNA test. During those days, Clara began to visit his house on supervised visits. The connection between her and Sophia was astonishing. The 2 seemed to communicate without words, sharing laughs and secrets as if they had grown up together. But it was the little details that disturbed Thomas the most. Like when Clara, having never been to the apartment before, went straight to Isabel's old library and took her favorite book from the shelf, a rare copy of Portuguese poetry that was hidden behind other volumes. Or when she sat down at the piano and began to play the same melody that Isabel used to compose on Sunday afternoons. Mr. Müller, the receptionist called, interrupting his thoughts. Dr. Victor is waiting for you. The doctor, a middle-aged man with gray hair and a serene expression, welcomed him into his office. On the table, a sealed envelope contained the results that could change everything or nothing. Before we open the results, Dr. Victor began, I need to put something in context. In 25 years of my career, I have never seen anything like this. We repeated the test 3 times to be sure. Thomas felt his heart race. What exactly do you mean? Clara's DNA shows a genetic match with the samples we had archived from Isabel Müller, a match that, scientifically speaking, would indicate a maternal relationship. The businessman felt the world spin. That's impossible. Isabel left before Clara was even born. How? Exactly. The doctor interrupted, adjusting his glasses. It's biologically impossible, but genetic markers don't lie. There are identical DNA sequences, hereditary traits that could only come from a biological mother. Thomas opened the envelope with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the graphs and numbers that seemed to dance across the page. What other explanations could there be? Scientifically? None that I know of, the doctor replied, leaning back in his chair. But you know, Mr. Müller, throughout my career, I have learned that there are mysteries that science cannot yet explain. Leaving the lab, Thomas automatically drove to the old apartment where he had lived with Isabel. He had kept the place intact, like a shrine to memories he could not leave. The housekeeper still came weekly to clean and air the place, keeping everything exactly as Isabel had left it. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Thomas walked to Isabel's office, where she spent hours writing her college papers. Every object still carried her essence, the colorful post-its with notes in her delicate handwriting, the pens organized by color, the books with bookmarks on the pages she never finished reading. It was then that he noticed something different. One of the desk drawers, the one that had always been locked, was slightly ajar. Thomas was sure he had never been able to open. Isabel kept the key in a place she had taken with her. He pulled the drawer open carefully, feeling the weight of the ancient wood. Inside he found a green-covered diary with the initials V engraved in gold. His hands trembled as he opened the first page, immediately recognizing his wife's handwriting. Dear Diary, today I had that feeling again. As if I could see through the veil of time, as if I could see beyond the now. I saw a girl as clear as the morning light, with eyes that seemed to carry all the wisdom of the universe. I know I should be frightened by these visions, but they bring me peace. As if the future were sending me signs that everything will be okay, even when I'm no longer here. Thomas read on page after page, discovering a side of Isabel he had never known. She described dreams, visions, and premonitions with frightening clarity. She spoke of an inexplicable connection with a child who had not yet existed, of plans that transcended linear time. In one of her last entries, dated just a few days before her departure, Isabel wrote something that took Thomas's breath away. If something happens to me, don't be afraid. Fate always finds a way to bring us together. Trust in what comes. And just below, in shaky handwriting, as if written in a moment of revelation, her name will be Clara. Thomas closed the diary, feeling the weight of his discoveries on his shoulders. How could Isabel have known? How could she have planned everything so precisely? A soft noise made him turn. Clara was standing in the doorway of the office, her amber eyes glowing with an unearthly intensity in the late afternoon light. You read it, didn't you? Now you understand, she said, her voice carrying that inexplicable maturity that so intrigued him. Before Thomas could respond, a gentle breeze blew through the window, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of jasmine, Isabel's scent. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, as if past and present had merged into a single reality. Clara walked toward him, her footsteps silent on the carpet. As she got closer, Thomas could see in her eyes a reflection of something familiar, something he hadn't seen in a long time, but that his heart had never forgotten. Night was falling over the city when Thomas and Clara left their old apartment. During the drive to the orphanage, the silence in the car was punctuated only by the girl's soft breathing as she watched the city through the window with contemplative eyes. Thomas couldn't stop thinking about everything he had discovered in the last few hours. You remember her, don't you? Clara asked suddenly, her voice breaking the silence like a drop in still water. Thomas adjusted the rearview mirror, meeting the girl's gaze. Who are you talking about, Clara? From Mama Isabel, he replied matter-of-factly, as if commenting on the weather. She always said you had a special way of frowning when you were confused, just like you're doing now. The businessman felt a shiver run down his spine. It was true. Isabel had always joked about his frowning habit, saying that he looked like a little boy trying to solve a particularly difficult math problem. When they arrived at the orphanage, Sister Abigail was waiting for them at the gate, her serene expression masking obvious curiosity. "Clara, dear, Lena has prepared a special hot chocolate for you in the kitchen." The girl smiled, but before walking away, she turned to Thomas. "You'll come back tomorrow, won't you? Sophia promised to teach me how to make origami." "Of course," he replied, surprised at the certainty in his own voice. After Clara left, Sister led Thomas back to her office. The room was different now, bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon that came through the ancient windows. "I found this today," Thomas said, placing the diary on the table. It was in Isabel's old office. The drawer that had always been locked was suddenly open. The nun took the diary with reverential care, as if handling a sacred relic. "You know, Mr. Muller, in all these years of serving God, I have learned that there are mysteries that were not meant to be solved, only accepted." "But how can I accept something that defies all logic?" he asked, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "The DNA test, the letters, this diary. How could Isabel have foreseen all of this?" Sister Abigail closed her eyes for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "There's an old story that's always made me wonder. They say that some souls are so connected that they find ways to stay together, even when separated by the veil of time. Not as an ordinary reincarnation, but as a continuation, an echo of the love that transcends existence itself." Thomas remembered the words in the diary, the way Isabel had described her visions. She knew. Somehow, she always knew. "Clara came to us one spring morning," the sister continued. "A young woman brought her, saying only that she was fulfilling a promise. Along with the baby came letters and specific instructions. The woman disappeared before we could ask any questions." "And you never found out who it was?" "No," replied the nun. "But something curious happened that day. All the flowers in the garden, which had been closed because of the cold, bloomed at the same time. The scent of jasmine was so strong that it seemed to permeate the air." Thomas felt his heart skip a beat. Jasmine, the scent he had always associated with Isabel, the same scent he had smelled in the apartment earlier. "There's one more thing. You need to see," Sister said, standing up and walking over to an old filing cabinet. From there, she took out a yellowed folder. "These are Clara's drawings from when she first arrived here. The pages were filled with children's drawings, but with one disturbing detail. They all depicted the same scene, a family of 4, with one of the figures always depicted in lighter, almost transparent tones. She started drawing this before she could even talk," Sister explained. "When we asked her who the people were, she would always point to the transparent figure and say, 'Mommy.'" Thomas examined the drawings, noticing how they evolved over time. The lines became more defined, more precise. In one of the most recent ones, he clearly recognized his own image, Sophia, Clara, and in the background, a female figure with long, dark hair and a familiar smile. "Last night," the nun continued, "Clara had one of her special moments. She sometimes goes into an almost meditative state, saying things that seem to come from another place, another time. Do you know what she said?" Thomas shook his head, unable to form words. "She said, 'Love is like water. It always finds a way. Even when it seems blocked, it creates new paths, new ways to flow.' Those are pretty profound words for a 6-year-old, don't you think?" At that moment, a soft melody began to echo through the hallway, the notes of the piano in the main hall. Thomas recognized the music immediately. It was Isabel's unfinished composition, the one she never finished. But now, in Clara's hands, the melody had an ending, as if the girl had always known how the song should end. The decision to start the adoption process for Clara was almost instinctive. Thomas spent the following days immersed in a frantic routine of paperwork, interviews with social workers, and preparations for the girl's possible arrival. But it was in the quiet moments, when he was alone in his office at the company, that doubts assailed him most strongly. One particularly busy afternoon, her secretary announced an unexpected visitor, Diana Moretti, Isabel's best friend and Sophia's godmother. She entered the room with her usual elegance, but there was something different about her expression. "We need to talk, Thomas," she said, sitting down in the leather chair in front of his desk. "I understand you're planning to adopt a girl from the Sunset Home." Thomas frowned in surprise. He hadn't discussed his plans with anyone other than his immediate family. "How did you—" "Isabel came to me," Diana interrupted, her voice shaking slightly. 3 months before she left. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken meaning. Diana opened her purse and took out a yellowed envelope, similar to the ones Thomas had found in the wooden box. "She made me promise not to give this to you until you found Clara," Diana continued, holding out the envelope. "At the time, I thought it was just another one of her moments of intuition. Isabel always had this gift of knowing things before they happened." With trembling hands, Thomas opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a photograph he had never seen before. In the picture, Isabel was sitting on a park bench, smiling at the camera with one hand on her belly, as if she were pregnant. "Dear Thomas, if you are reading this letter, it means that Diana has kept her promise and that you have found our Clara. I know you must be wondering how all this is possible, how I could have known about events that would happen years after my departure. The truth, my love, is that some mysteries of the universe are greater than our understanding. In the last weeks of my earthly life, I began to have increasingly clear visions. I saw our entire family. You, Sophia, and a little girl with amber eyes who carried within her a part of my soul. It wasn't reincarnation, as some might think. It was something different, a connection that transcends the linear time we know. Clara is a gift from the universe, a bridge between worlds, proof that love always finds a way to manifest itself. The photo I am sending with this letter was taken the day I became certain. I was in the park, thinking about how to tell you about my visions, when I felt a presence so strong, so real, that I instinctively placed my hand on my belly. Diana was with me and recorded the moment. It wasn't a physical pregnancy, but a spiritual one. At that moment, I knew that part of my essence would find a way to return to our family through Clara. I know your rational heart must be struggling to accept all of this, but I ask you to trust in the love that has always united us. Some truths can only be understood by the heart. Take care of our girls, and when you miss me, look for me in Clara's eyes. I will be there, just as I have always been in every important moment of our lives. With eternal love, Isabel. Thomas looked up from the letter, finding Diana in tears. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "How could you?" she replied softly. "You needed to find Clara on your own, needed to feel the connection without outside influences. That's how Isabel planned it." "Did she tell you about the visions?" Diana nodded, wiping away a tear. She'd been different these past few weeks, more serene, as if she'd made peace with something bigger than all of us. She spent hours writing letters, organizing documents, preparing everything for a future only she could see. Thomas looked at the photograph again. Isabel's smile was radiant, her eyes shining with an inexplicable certainty. It was the same shine he saw in Clara's eyes. "There's one more thing," Diana said, taking a small object from her purse. It was an old music box with mother-of-pearl inlay. "Isabel asked me to keep this. She said Clara would know how to open it." The little box had a complex mechanism with no apparent lock. Thomas examined it, remembering how Isabel loved puzzles and intricate mechanisms. "She said that when Clara opened the box, you would have your last proof," Diana added. "Although, knowing Isabel as I did, I'm sure you won't need proof at that point." The afternoon sun was beginning to set, painting the office in golden hues. Thomas carefully put the letter and the photograph away, along with the mysterious little box. His world, which had always been built on solid foundations of logic and reason, was transforming into something deeper, more mysterious. And for the first time since he had begun this journey, he allowed himself to simply feel, without trying to understand. Perhaps this was Isabel's true gift, the ability to believe in the inexplicable, to accept that some bonds are too strong to be broken even by the veil that separates the worlds. The next morning, Thomas took the music box to the orphanage. The day dawned with a soft mist covering the city, giving it an almost mystical air. Sophia accompanied him, jumping with joy at the prospect of another day with Clara. When they arrived at La Porte du Sol, they found Clara sitting on the garden swing, as if she had been waiting for them. She was wearing a light blue dress and had a white ribbon in her hair, exactly as Isabel appeared in one of the old photos from her childhood. "You brought it," Clara said, her eyes fixed on the little box Thomas carried. It wasn't a question. Sophia ran to hug her future sister, while Thomas approached more slowly, watching the scene with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Sister Abigail watched them discreetly from the balcony. "Diana gave it to me yesterday," Thomas explained, sitting on a bench near the swing. "She said you'd know how to open it." Clara took the box with reverential delicacy, her small fingers gliding over the mother-of-pearl carvings. "Mummy loved puzzles," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "How do you know that?" Sophia asked curiously. "I just know," Clara replied simply. Her fingers continued to explore the little box, as if reading a secret language, see-through touch. Thomas watched every movement carefully. The box was an exquisite work of craftsmanship, with geometric patterns that seemed to form a complex code. There was no visible lock, just a series of panels that seemed to slide in different directions. "It's like a dance," Clara said softly. "Each piece has its own rhythm, its own music." His fingers began to move the Y. Panels in a specific sequence, first to the right, then 3 times to the left, a turn on the center panel, as if following an invisible melody. Thomas recognized the pattern. It was the same sequence of notes from Isabel's unfinished song. With C, a soft click, the little box opened. The interior was lined with red velvet, and a small porcelain ballerina began to spin to the sound of a familiar melody, the same one Clara had played on the piano, but now complete, with the ending Isabel had never written. Inside were several small objects, a crib bracelet with the name Clara engraved on it, a lock of hair tied with a blue ribbon, and a sealed envelope with the previous day's date written on the front. "Impossible," Thomas muttered, taking the envelope with trembling hands. "This date." "Open up," Clara asked, her voice carrying that inexplicable maturity. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper with Isabel's unmistakable handwriting. "My love, if you are reading this, it means that our Clara managed to open the little box. She always knew the complete melody. It was the song I sang to her in my visions, in the moments when our worlds touched. The bracelet was a gift I bought at an old jewelry store downtown. The salesperson looked at me strangely when I asked to have the name Clara engraved on it, since I wasn't pregnant at the time. But I knew that one day she would wear this bracelet. The lock of hair is mine, cut the day I had my first clear vision of our future daughter. I wanted to leave a physical part of myself to her, something beyond memories and love that transcends time. Thomas, I know your heart is still struggling to comprehend all of this, but look at Clara now. Notice how she holds the little box just as I held my music boxes. See how her eyes shine with the same shade of amber that so intrigued you in mine. Some souls are connected in ways that science cannot yet explain. Clara is not a replacement. She is a continuation, a new chapter in our love story. Through her, I have found a way to stay with our family, to watch Sophia grow, to continue. Loving you, take care of our girls. And when the music plays, remember, true love always finds a melody to express itself. With eternal love, Isabel. P.S. The date on this envelope is today, because love knows no time barriers. Thomas looked up from his letter to find Clara placing the bracelet on her small wrist. It fit perfectly. The ballerina continued to spin, the melody filling the garden with its bittersweet notes. Sophia approached her sister, touching the bracelet curiously. "It's just like mine," she exclaimed, showing her own crib bracelet, a gift from Isabel that she never took off. The morning mist was beginning to dissipate, letting in golden rays of sunlight that seemed to dance around the girls. And there, in that moment, suspended, in time, Thomas felt a certainty that went beyond reason. His family was whole again, in a way that only love could explain. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries. The adoption process moved forward with unusual speed, as if all the bureaucratic gears had been magically oiled. Thomas couldn't help but think that somehow Isabel had paved the way for this very thing. One particularly significant afternoon, while organizing the room that would be Clara's, Thomas found Sophia sitting in the middle of the room, leafing through an old photo album. "Daddy!" she called, pointing to a specific photo. "Look at this." The photograph showed Isabel at 6 years old, the same age as Clara. She was sitting in front of a piano, wearing a light blue dress with a white ribbon in her hair, exactly as Clara had looked on the day of the music box. "It's amazing how much they look alike, isn't it?" commented Lena, the housekeeper, as she passed by carrying some new bed linens. "Sometimes when I see Clara out of the corner of my eye, I get the impression that she's Donna Isabel as a child again." Thomas sat beside his daughter, looking at more photos. Each image seemed to reveal a new connection, a new echo between past and present. There were gestures, expressions, small details that were impossibly similar. "You know, Daddy," Sophia said, her voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years, "sometimes I dream about Mommy, and in the dreams she always talks about Clara, as if she's preparing me to be a good big sister." Thomas felt his heart tighten. "And what does she say in these dreams, Princess?" "She says love is like a circle. It has no beginning or end. It just keeps spinning, finding new ways back home." Sophia closed the album carefully. "It's funny, because Clara said the same thing yesterday when we were playing." The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was from the orphanage. Clara had asked to speak to him urgently. 20 minutes later, Thomas was at the Sunset home. He found Clara in the garden, sitting under the same tree where Isabel, who used to read when she was a volunteer teacher at the institution, another detail he had only recently discovered. "I needed to show you something," Clara said as he approached. In her hands was a sketchbook. The pages were filled with detailed sketches of places Clara had never visited: the interior of the beach house where Isabel and Thomas spent their honeymoon, the Parisian cafe where they met on a work trip, even the secret room in the attic of Isabel's parents' house, where she kept her teenage diaries. "How do you know these places, Clara?" "I see them in my dreams," she replied simply. "But they're not just dreams, they're memories, her memories, mine. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." Thomas flipped through the notebook, each page revealing a new fragment of the past depicted with an accuracy impossible for someone who had never been there. "There's one more thing," Clara said, turning to the last page. It was a different drawing, a more recent one. It showed a room Thomas didn't recognize, with large windows and walls lined with books. In the center was a white piano. "This place doesn't look familiar to me," he commented. "Not yet," Clara replied with a small smile. "It's the place where I'm going to give my first piano recital. Mum showed me in a dream last night." Thomas felt a shiver run down his spine. "Your first recital?" "Yes, it will be next year, in the new music wing you're going to build for the orphanage." He blinked in surprise. "What new music wing?" "The one you'll decide to build," Clara explained patiently. "After you realize how many children here have musical talent, but don't have proper instruments to practice on." It was disconcerting how she spoke of the future as naturally as she spoke of the past, as if time were just a fluid concept, a river that could be navigated in any direction. "Clara," Thomas began, choosing his words carefully, "how do you know all these things?" The girl closed her sketchbook and looked at him with those familiar amber eyes. "It's like the music in the music. Box, Daddy. Some melodies exist long before they're played, they just wait for the right moment to be heard." At that moment, a gentle breeze passed through the garden, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of jasmine. Clara closed her eyes and smiled, as if listening to a voice that only she could hear. "Mommy is happy," she said softly. "Happy because we're finally all together, like she always knew we would be." The months that followed brought a series of changes for the Müller family. Clara's adoption was finalized with a speed that surprised even the judge overseeing the case. "It's as if the universe conspired in favor of this union," he commented during the final hearing. Clara's adjustment to her new life was surprisingly smooth. It was as if she had always been a part of the family, filling in spaces Thomas didn't even know existed. Sophia and Clara developed an almost telepathic connection, often finishing each other's sentences or laughing at jokes no one else understood. One Saturday morning, Thomas woke to the sound of the piano echoing through the house. He quietly descended the stairs to find Clara sitting at the instrument, her small fingers dancing over the keys with a skill that defied her age. Sophia was beside her, turning the pages of the sheet music. "Good morning, Daddy," Clara said, without stopping playing or looking back. "I hope I didn't wake you." "You haven't woken up," he replied, coming closer. "What's that music? It doesn't sound familiar." "It's because it hasn't been written yet," Sophia explained matter-of-factly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Clara is composing it." Thomas stared at the sheet music. The notes flowed across the paper, creating a complex and moving melody that seemed to tell a story without words. It was a perfect blend of joy and melancholy, of longing and hope. "It's called Symphony of Fate," Clara said, finally stopping playing and turning to Thomas. "It's the story of our family." At that moment, the businessman noticed something curious. Clara was wearing a bracelet he had never seen before. It was delicate, made of silver with small pendants in the shape of musical notes. "That bracelet," he began. "It was a gift from Mom," Clara replied, caressing the pendants. "She gave it to me in a dream last night. She said I would find it in the dresser drawer this morning." Thomas felt his heart race. "And you found it?" Clara nodded as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Exactly where she said it would be." Sophia, noticing her father's astonished expression, intervened. "Daddy, you shouldn't be so surprised. After all, Mommy always keeps her promises no matter which side of the veil she's on." The wisdom in Sophia's words took him by surprise. His eldest daughter, who had previously struggled to accept the idea of a new sister, now seemed completely at peace with the situation, as if she understood something beyond the adult's comprehension. "Come, Daddy," Clara called, patting the piano bench beside her. "I'll teach you to play the part that represents you in the symphony." As he sat down, Thomas noticed a note pinned to the sheet music. The handwriting was unmistakable. Isabel. With shaking hands, he picked it up and read, "My love, the song Clara is composing is more than just a melody. It is proof that our story continues, that our love has found a way to transcend time and space. Each note is a memory, each chord a dream come true. I know it's hard to believe sometimes, that your rational mind struggles to accept the inexplicable. But I ask that you open your heart to the magic that surrounds us. Clara is not just our daughter. She is the bridge between worlds, the bond that holds our family together even when it seems impossible. Continue guiding our girls with love and wisdom. And when you miss me, close your eyes and listen to the music. I will be there in every note, in every silence between the chords. With eternal love, Isabel Pess." Don't forget the recital next month. It will be a special moment for all of us. Thomas looked up from the note, meeting Clara and Sophia's expectant gazes. The piano in front of him seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, as if it were alive, eager to continue telling his family's story through music. "So, Daddy," Clara said softly, "are you ready to learn your part in the symphony?" In that moment, surrounded by the love of his daughters and the ethereal presence of Isabel, Thomas felt ready not only to learn a new song, but to fully embrace the mystery and magic that had entered his life. With a smile, he placed his hands on the piano keys, ready to play his part in the great symphony of destiny that bound his family together through time and love. The weeks leading up to Clara's recital were filled with a mixture of anticipation and nostalgia. Thomas, spurred on by his daughter's excitement, decided to actually build the new music wing at La Porte du Sol, just as Clara had envisioned. The project moved forward with astonishing speed, as if every bureaucratic obstacle simply dissolved in the face of the Müller family's determination. One afternoon, while overseeing construction work, Thomas came across something unexpected. Hidden behind an old bookshelf in the orphanage library was a dusty box with the name Isabel Müller handwritten on it. Intrigued, he opened it, discovering a treasure trove of forgotten memories. Inside the box were dozens of handwritten sheets of music, all in Isabel's delicate handwriting. They were compositions she had created during her time as a volunteer at the orphanage, songs she had never shared with the world. Among the yellowed pages, Thomas found a diary. With his heart racing, he began to read. May 15th, 2015. Today, I had a dream so vivid that I can still feel its reality pulsing through me. I saw a little girl, no more than a child, sitting at the piano in this very room. Her fingers danced over the keys with a skill that defied her age. The music she played, it was as if I could hear the universe itself singing. The strangest thing is that when I looked at her, I saw myself, not as a reflection, but as a continuation. As if somehow my music, my love, would find a way back into this world even after I was gone. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel that this dream is more than just a daydream. It is a promise, a glimpse of a future that I cannot fully understand, but that fills me with inexplicable hope. Thomas closed the diary, his hands shaking slightly. The date of the entry was almost 10 years ago, long before Clara was born, long before anyone could have imagined the events that would unfold. At tea, that moment, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. It was Clara, holding her inseparable music folder. "You found it," she said simply, her eyes shining with a knowledge beyond her years. "Did you know about this?" Thomas asked, showing the diary. Clara nodded, sitting down next to him on the dusty library floor. "Mom told me in a dream. She said that when you found this diary, it would be time to show you something special." She opened her briefcase, pulling out a neatly folded sheet of music. The paper was new, but the music written on it looked ancient, as if it had been composed a long time ago. "This is the last part of the Symphony of Fate," Clara explained. "The part that unites past, present, and future." Thomas examined the sheet music, his heart nearly stopping as he recognized the handwriting. The first half was written by Isabel, in exactly the same style as the compositions he had just found in the box. The second half, perfectly integrated with the first, was in Clara's childish handwriting. "How?" Thomas began, unable to formulate the complete question. "Mom started this composition a long time ago," Clara said softly. "She knew she couldn't finish it in this lifetime, so she left it to me to complete it. It's our song, Dad, our family's song." At that moment, as if answering a silent call, a gentle breeze blew in through the library window, bringing with it the scent of jasmine. The sheet music in the case rustled slightly, and for a moment Thomas thought he could hear a distant melody, like an echo from the past blending into the present. Clara took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his with a familiarity that went beyond their time together. "Come on, Daddy," she said, standing up. "It's time to rehearse. The recital is soon and we have a promise to keep." As he followed Clara out of the library, Thomas felt a deep certainty settle in his heart. The music they were about to play was not just a composition, it was a portal, a magical link that united his family across time and love. And so, father and daughter walked together towards the future, carrying with them the notes of the past, and the promise of an eternal melody that would continue to echo far beyond that moment. The day of the recital dawned with a special clarity, as if the city sky itself had decided to open up for the event. The new music wing of La Porte du Sol shone, its freshly painted walls reflecting the golden morning light. The auditorium, with its perfect acoustics and the majestic white grand piano in the center of the stage, was ready to receive the guests. Thomas, adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his hands shaking slightly. It wasn't just the natural nervousness of a father about to see his daughter perform. It was the awareness of the transcendent moment they were about to experience. Sophia entered the room, already dressed in her pale blue dress, identical to the one Clara would wear. "Daddy," she called softly. "Clara wants to show you something before we go." He followed his eldest daughter into Clara's room. The door was ajar, and a soft, almost ethereal melody was playing from within. As he entered, Thomas saw Clara sitting on the edge of the bed, her fingers dancing in the air as if she were playing an invisible piano. Her eyes were closed, and there was an expression of deep concentration on her face. "She's rehearsing," Sophia whispered. "But not just the music, she says she's aligning the frequencies." Before Thomas could ask what that meant, Clara opened her eyes. "It's all set," she said with a serene smile. "Mommy will be there with us today." Thomas's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, dear?" Clara stood, grabbing something from her bedside table. It was a small, intricately crafted silver medallion. "Mom showed me where to find this last night. It's the final key to the symphony." Thomas picked up the locket, recognizing it instantly. It was a family heirloom that had belonged to Isabel's mother, thought lost years ago. How could Clara have found it? "When I play the last note of the symphony using this medallion," Clara explained with disconcerting ease, "we will open a portal, just for a moment, but it will be enough for us to feel Mom's presence among us." Sophia, who had been watching everything in silence until then, added, "It's true, Daddy. I've dreamed about it too. It's going to be magical." Thomas looked at his daughters, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't name. Part of him wanted to question, to rationalize, to seek logical explanations, but another part, a part that had grown stronger every day, since Clara had come into their lives, was ready to embrace the inexplicable. "So," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "I guess we'd better hurry. We can't keep our audience waiting, can we?" The girls smiled, and together, the Müller family set off for what promised to be much more than a simple recital. The auditorium was packed. Friends, family, children, and orphanage staff all gathered to witness something that, unbeknownst to them, was much more than a musical performance. When Clara took the stage, there was a collective gasp. She seemed to radiate a light of her own, her amber eyes shining with an otherworldly intensity. Thomas and Sophia occupied the front row, both holding each other's hands in anticipation. Clara sat down at the piano, adjusting the stool with the grace of a veteran. The silver medallion around her neck glinted, catching and reflecting the light from the spotlight. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to a voice only she could hear, and then she began to play. The first notes of the symphony of fate filled the auditorium, enveloping everyone in a web of pure emotion. Thomas immediately recognized the parts composed by Isabel, feeling his heart tighten at the familiarity of the melody. But when Clara began to play the part she had composed herself, something extraordinary happened. The air in the auditorium seemed to thicken, charged with a palpable energy. The lights flickered softly, and a deep, unmistakable scent of jasmine filled the room. Thomas felt Sophia grip his hand tighter, her wide eyes fixed on the stage. As Clara neared the end of the symphony, the music reached a crescendo that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The notes resonated not just through the ears, but through the bodies and souls of everyone present. And then, at the exact moment her fingers touched the last key, the medallion around her neck glowed with a light of its own. For an instant that seemed to stretch into eternity, Thomas saw. There beside Clara at the piano, translucent but undeniably present, was Isabel. Her smile was radiant, her eyes filled with love, her hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. Tears streamed freely down the faces of Thomas, Sophia, and many in the audience who, even without fully understanding, felt they were witnessing something beyond this world. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vision was gone. The last chord of the symphony reverberated through the auditorium, leaving a silence filled with wonder and emotion. Clara opened her eyes, her face lit up with a smile that mixed joy and serenity. She looked directly at Thomas and Sophia, and, in a voice that seemed to carry echoes of Isabel, she said softly, "She has always been here, and she always will be." The auditorium erupted in applause, but for the Müller family, the true miracle had happened behind the scenes of reality, in a moment suspended between worlds, where love had proven to be stronger than any barrier, even that of time itself. The days that followed the recital were filled with deep reflection and change for the Müller family. The transcendental experience they had in the La Porte du Sol auditorium had left indelible marks on their souls, opening doors of perception that Thomas had never imagined possible. A week after the event, Thomas decided to take a few days off from work to spend time with the girls at the family beach house, the same one where he and Isabel had spent their honeymoon so many years ago. It was a chance to process everything that had happened and perhaps find some answers. The car ride was filled with Sophia and Clara's laughter as they sang along excitedly to the songs playing on the radio. Thomas watched in the rearview mirror, marveling at the deep connection the sisters had developed in such a short time. When they arrived at the beach house, they were greeted by a gentle breeze laden with the scent of the sea and, surprisingly, a hint of jasmine. Clara was the first to notice. "Mom is glad we came," she said matter-of-factly, as if commenting on the weather. Sophia nodded in agreement, taking her sister's hand. "Let's see if the old swing is still back there." As the girls ran into the backyard, Thomas entered the house and was immediately enveloped by memories. Every corner, every object seemed to tell a story of times he had shared with Isabel, but instead of the sharp pain he usually felt, there was now a sense of comfort, as if her presence still permeated the place. On the living room table, Thomas found something that hadn't been there the last time they'd visited the house, an old book of poetry that Isabel had loved. Curious, he opened it, finding a bookmark for a specific poem. The words seemed to leap off the page. "Love is eternal. Its manifestation may change, but not its essence. Through death and life, from plane to plane, love guides us home." Below the poem, in Isabel's unmistakable handwriting, was a note. "Thomas, my love, when you read this, you will know that our journey together is just beginning. Clara is our bridge, our miracle. Take care of her, guide her, but also be open to learning from her. There are mysteries in the universe that only the heart can decipher. I will always be with you in every beat of your hearts, in every note of music, in every ray of sunshine. With eternal love, Isabel." Thomas felt hot tears roll down his face, but they were tears of gratitude, of understanding, of a love that transcended the barriers of time and space. At that moment, he heard the sound of the piano coming from the old office. He followed the melody, finding Clara sitting at the instrument, her fingers dancing over the keys with the same ethereal grace as always. Sophia was beside her, her eyes closed, swaying gently to the rhythm of the music. "What's that song, honey?" Thomas asked, leaning against the doorframe. Clara smiled, still playing. "It's a new composition, Daddy. It's called Echoes of Tomorrow. Mommy is helping me write it." "What do you mean?" he asked, sitting down next to his daughters. "Sometimes," Clara explained, "when I'm about to fall asleep or when I'm meditating, I can hear Mom whispering melodies. It's as if she's guiding me through the music, showing me notes that haven't been played yet, harmonies that exist beyond time." Sophia opened her eyes, her gaze filled with a surprising understanding for her age. "It's true, Daddy, I can feel it, too. Not as intensely as Clara, but it's like Mommy is hugging us through the music." Thomas closed his eyes, letting himself be enveloped by the melody that Clara played. And there, in that moment suspended between reality and dream, he felt it. A warm, loving, unmistakable presence. Isabel was there, not as a ghost or a distant memory, but as a living, pulsating force that united them through love and music. "She wants you to know," Clara said softly, her hands still dancing over the keys, "that this is just the beginning. Our family has a greater purpose, Daddy. The music we're creating, It has the power to heal, to unite, to transcend. Thomas opened his eyes, looking at his daughters with new understanding. It wasn't just Clara and Sophia he saw there, but also reflections of Isabel, echoes of a love that refused to be limited by the barriers of the physical. "And what is that purpose?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Clara stopped playing, turning to look at him with those amber eyes that seemed to contain all the wisdom of the universe. "To show the world that love is the most powerful force there is, that it can transcend time, space, even death, and through music we can open portals, heal hearts, unite souls." Sophia took her father's hand, squeezing it gently. "Don't be afraid. Daddy, we're all on this journey together. Mommy, you, me, and Clara, one family forever." In that moment, enveloped by the love of his daughters and the ethereal presence of Isabel, Thomas understood that his life had become something much greater than he had ever imagined. It was not just about overcoming loss or finding new meaning. It was about embracing a cosmic destiny, a mission of love that transcended the limits of human understanding. And so, in the beach house where so many memories had been created, a new story began to be written. A story of love, music, and magic, one that would echo through time, touching hearts and uniting souls for generations to come. Summer was saying goodbye to the city, painting the sky with golden and pink hues. On the miller's penthouse, the soft sound of the piano filled the air, mingling with Sophia's laughter and the clinking of cups in the kitchen where Lena was preparing afternoon tea. Thomas stood on the porch, staring out at the city skyline that stretched out before him. His eyes, once marked by sadness, now shone with a serenity that surprised everyone who knew him. The past few months had been a journey of transformation, not just for him, but for his entire family. After that revelatory week at the beach house, things began to change in ways Thomas could never have anticipated. Clara's music, imbued with that ethereal, otherworldly quality, began to attract the attention of people all over the country. What began as small benefit performances for La Pour du Sol soon turned into invitations to concerts in major theaters. Music critics were perplexed, unable to explain how a child so young could create such profound and emotional compositions. But Thomas knew. He knew that every note Clara played was a collaboration between two worlds, a sonic bridge between the visible and the invisible. And Sophia, with her natural gift for the visual arts, began creating paintings that seemed to capture the essence of her sister's music, bringing the colors and shapes of Clara's melodies to the canvas. "Daddy," Clara called, interrupting his thoughts. She stood in the doorway of the balcony, her amber eyes shining with that ancient wisdom that still took him by surprise sometimes. "It's time." Thomas nodded, following his daughter into the living room. In the center of the room, the white grand piano, an exact replica of the one at Sunset Home, waited. Sophia was already sitting on a nearby stool, her sketchbook on her lap, colored pencils scattered around her. "Today is special," Clara said, sitting down at the piano. "Mommy says it's time for us to share our music with the world in a new way." Thomas sat beside Sophia, feeling that familiar mix of anticipation and awe that always preceded Clara's magical moments. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, as if tuning into an invisible frequency. When her fingers touched the keys, the melody that emerged was unlike anything Thomas had ever heard before. It was as if each note was a drop of sound light, filling the room with almost palpable colors and sensations. Sophia, as if in a trance, began to draw furiously in her notebook. Her hands moved with superhuman speed and precision, creating shapes and patterns that seemed to dance to the rhythm of the music. Thomas felt the air around him grow thicker, charged with energy. The scent of jasmine, now a constant presence in their lives, intensified. And then it happened. In the space between the piano and where they were sitting, the air began to shimmer. Tiny points of light, like tiny stars, appeared out of nowhere, dancing and moving in time to the music. Gradually, these lights began to group together, forming a silhouette that Thomas would recognize anywhere at any time. Isabel. It was not a solid or ghostly apparition, but a form made of light and music, as real and present as the air they breathed. Its smile, the smile Thomas thought he would never see again, lit the room with a glow that came from another world. "My loves," Isabel's voice echoed, not through the air, but directly into their hearts. "Are you ready for the next step of our journey?" Sophia dropped her notebook, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Mommy, we did it. We managed to open the portal." Clara continued playing, but her eyes were open now, fixed on her mother's luminous form. "The symphony is complete," she said, her voice blending with the piano notes. "Past, present, and future, united in harmony." Thomas stood, walking hesitantly toward Isabel's glowing form. Each step seemed to take him through layers of reality, as if he were passing through invisible veils of existence. "Isabel," he whispered, extending his hand. The luminous form smiled, extending its own ethereal hand. When they touched, there was no physical contact, but an explosion of sensation and memory. Thomas saw in an instant the entire journey that had brought them here, the love they had shared, the pain of separation, Clara's miracle, the rediscovery of hope. But he also saw the future, a path of light stretching out before them, full of possibilities and promises. "Our love has opened a door, Thomas," Isabel said, her voice echoing through dimensions. "A door to a new understanding, a new way of being. Through Clara's music and Sophia's art, we can show the world that there are no barriers that true love cannot overcome." The music reached a crescendo, and the entire room seemed to vibrate with pure energy. Thomas felt as if every cell in his body was aligning with a cosmic frequency, a universal symphony of which they were only a small but vital part. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice shaking with emotion. Isabel smiled, her luminous being pulsing with love. "Now, my love, we begin our true mission, to use music and art to heal, to unite, to remind people of the most fundamental truth in the universe, that love is eternal, that we are all one." Clara ended the song with a chord that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of reality. Sophia held up her sketchbook, revealing a drawing that perfectly captured the moment. Her family, united, enveloped in light and music, with lines of energy connecting them not only to each other, but to the entire cosmos around them. As Isabel's luminous form began to dissipate, returning to the plane from which it had come, her voice echoed one last time. "Remember, my loves, every note you play, every stroke you draw, every act of love you share, is a bridge between worlds. Continue our eternal symphony and show the world the transformative power of true love." And so, on that golden afternoon, the Müller family embraced their destiny. No longer just a family united by loss and mystery, but guardians of a universal truth, messengers of a cosmic symphony, of love that would echo through the ages, touching hearts and uniting souls for all eternity.